Just, can you hear me now? Oh, I'm so sorry, we didn't realize that. Please, anytime you can't hear us, let us know. One of the things that we're into now is getting money back. Some counties have lost as much as 30% of the money that happened in the disaster. You have to account for people working, volunteers working, equipment being done. All those things have to be accounted for on pieces of paper and submitted. 30% of $19-20 million is a lot of money out of our account. So we're big time into trying to do that with Jason and Michelle's help. We're hoping to get that down into 2 or 3%, which is something that we can swallow. But so if you see us trying to, what are they doing out there with the clipboard and all that stuff? That's what we're trying to do. We're talking about your tax dollars and us trying to save every one of them that we can. All right.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, please.
Ask Glenn, do we still have families that don't have electricity?
But we actually are down to zero. Georgia Power, Georgia PNC, and Griffin Power are considered zero. The only people that don't have power now is that if their homes are so far damaged that it cannot be restored.
Okay, thank you.
I think that's around 160 homes.
That number started out with over 1,000. 10,000, I mean. And to be able to, if you drove around our county, you would have seen, or should have seen, plenty of power up and down trying to get done. Some people had their power turned back off for a little bit for 30 minutes while they got another set up. Some telephone poles just put brand new poles right back up, electrical wires, old electrical wires just down on the ground to be able to do that. It was a cold period of time. So we're excited that how fast everybody was able to get back to power to be able to do that. The shelters were opened up so that people could come in, shower, get dry, and do those kinds of things and still stay in their home. We know that there was a reluctance to leave your home even if there was no power, that you wanted to stay there, go back at the night. Some of the folks that I know had a generator and moved all the furniture around and just opened the house up to people just to come in and just get warm right there and go back to their houses. So it has been a huge effort. Some of you may have seen an article that the city manager wrote about how it has pulled the entire county together. Strangers helping strangers, friends helping friends, things like that that we have never seen before to be able to do it. It is powerful when you're out looking around at what our county can do for each other when they turn their mind to it. So great news there. All right. For those of you that aren't familiar with it, everything that we see on the screen, on our screens out here, will be up on the big screen there. So please take an opportunity to read. If I don't read quite right, understand that that's just me and how tired I am. All right. Item number 1, I'm going to use the numbers that are up there so you can stay easier. Consider approval of actions taken by the county manager and Chairman Davis on behalf of the citizens of Spalding County with the consensus of the majority of the Board of Commissioners to facilitate assistance and aid in the expedient and efficient manner during the Spalding County state of emergency. Ms. Wyndham.
Immediately after the tornadoes on January 12th, the county manager and the chairman began to gather a consensus of the Board of Commissioners for an emergency declaration, and that emergency declaration was approved. I would like to have us approve that in an open meeting as well. If you have any questions about the emergency declaration, I'm certainly able to answer those. It is allowed by our ordinance, section 3-3014, which gives the governing authority of the county it gives them the authority to take actions deemed necessary to deal with such an emergency for the protection of the safety, health, and well-being of the citizens of the county. And also allowed us to suspend the bid process and competitive portions of the county's procurement policy, which allowed us to enter into immediate debris removal and debris monitoring contracts. Chief Polk is familiar with those contracts as well, and with the quotes that he received from other companies besides the ones that we ended up contracting with.
Do I have a motion to approve?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
What are, you said, this says approval of actions. I know the one action is the state of declaration of emergency. What are the other actions?
The other actions are the entering into the contract with Southern Disaster Recovery LLC for debris removal, and then Debris Tech LLC for debris monitoring. And we also,
That was a warehousing.
the warehousing contract has not yet been signed yet, but there were agreements with City Church for volunteers, agreement with FEMA for setting up the DRC. There may be other license agreements as well.
So I know that there are other agreements further down, but
Further
I'm
down,
saying
yes.
for this specific,
For
those,
this specific, we're talking about the Southern Disaster Recovery LLC debris removal contract and the Debris Tech LLC debris monitoring contract.
okay, so the motion to approve that, I would like, you made the motion. I think it needs to be said that those are the items.
No one made a motion. There's been
No motion made yet.
Okay. I would like to see that the motion specifically names those because we have others down on the other end, and that will encapsulate what this particular motion. So I'd like to make a motion to approve, the actions taken by the county manager and Chairman Davis on behalf of the citizens of Spalding County and declaring a state of emergency and creating contracts for debris removal and
Monitoring.
monitoring.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion, a second. Any more discussion? All those in favor signify by raising your hand. 5-0. Motion carries. Item number 2 on the current, up on the agenda, consider approval non-talk on a memorandum of understanding with the American Humane Society for assistance with the animals being housed at the Spalding County Animal Shelter. The 3 words, if you're not familiar with them, in Latin mean after the event. Correct? Okay. All right. Do I have a
Chairman,
mo-
I have a question.
Yes.
Since 2, 3, 4, and 5 are all non-pro-tunc, would it be possible for us to read them separately and approve them as a group? I'm looking at Stephanie.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Item number 3, consider FEMA license and use agreement for the use of the senior center as a disaster recovery center. Item number 4, consider for approval at no-cost space agreement with the U.S. Small Business Administration Office for disaster assistance. Item number 5, consider approval of a memorandum of understanding with the State of Georgia Insurance Commissioner, Allstate, State Farm, Georgia Farm Bureau, USAA, auto owners, travelers, and NICB for the use of senior center parking lot to meet with the citizens regarding damage and claims. Do I have a motion to approve all those?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve non-pro-tunc items 2, 3, 4, and 5 of the agenda under other business.
All right, I have a motion. Do I have a second? I have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All those in favor signify by raising your hand. 5-0. Thank you. So everybody understands, these are to make sure that we've got it back in the records and not just we did something without anybody knowing about it. Item number 6, consider approval of the streetlight district for the River Falls subdivision. Ms. Swindon,
That would be Mr. Gallagher.
excuse me. Mr. Galloway,
No, that would be me.
Eva. All right, we're going to find somebody here who's
Find
prepared to
somebody.
talk about this.
So, River Falls subdivision, is requesting to get streetlights approved in their area. This is a area that, does not have streetlights as of right now. They will consist of 12 black colonial LED lights, 10 lights at 11.75, and 2 lights at 9.75. With a monthly rental fee of $137,000. So I think this is consistent with what we got going on. This is their second hearing. The packet that we received from these citizens was pretty thick. Pretty much everybody in that subdivision is asking for streetlights at this point.
Thank you.
What's the street? Where is this located?
It's a subdivision off Locust Grove Road. It's one of the last subdivisions that you have out in that area.
I'm asking because I don't recall a village node. Because I did I say village node in there somewhere? Village, there
No.
being a village
No,
node in that
no,
area.
That was on the next page.
Different subdivision.
Okay. All right, gotcha.
Yeah, that's 5 on the
Did you make a
So
motion there?
this was in Locust
yet.
Grove?
Locust Grove Road, yes.
Locust Grove Road. Okay, yes, I'll make a motion. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the street lighting district for the River Falls subdivision on Locust Grove Road.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? I have a motion and a second. Any more discussion?
But they, like that subdivision's HOA pays for the lights, right?
Yes, yes. Zero balance with us. All right. Any more discussion? All those in favor signify by raising your hand. 5-0. Motion carries. New item number 7, consider approval to issue an RFP for debris removal, debris monitoring, and administrative services for reimbursement assistance.
Now is the time for us to actually put those services out to bid that we need to continue the debris removal. That the monitoring is required in order for us to be reimbursed by FEMA. So we do need those 2 different companies. The administrative services is for us to look at the potential of a group coming in that their sole focus is getting us the maximum reimbursement from FEMA. And from what we've heard from the city of Noonan, these companies are very worthwhile. They charge about 3% of the recovery, but the amount that they get us back is well worth that fee.
Are there any drawbacks with
So-
that?
so-
Sorry.
Well, it's an RFP, so if we look at if we open the bids and we don't see anything that we like, then it's not something that we actually have to contract
Okay.
for.
So I guess my question is that if we're still in a state of emergency, why would we not use a debris collection agency that we have for, I'm just asking, debris
Okay.
collection, and I understand that the other part of this is that this agency will also help us to refine how much debris we're collecting so that the reimbursement is better.
That's correct.
So-
So for the reason that we have to use our procurement policy at this point, and I just have to say that, Jason and Michelle, I cannot thank them enough for the wonderful support that they have given our community and the guiding hand that they have been in helping us to realize what we have to do to maximize our reimbursement. There are regulations that are less strict than Spalding County's procurement policy. We're required to use the more stringent of the policies in our procurement for these services. So when the emergency is technically considered to be over, we'll still be in need for these services, for removal and monitoring and potentially administrative services. Because our policy is more strict than the federal policy or even the state policy, we have to use our procurement policy, which requires us to put this out for bid at this point.
But aren't we still under a declaration of emergency?
The declaration of the emergency is gonna allow us to be reimbursed, but it does not make all the other rules go away.
Right, but, so how are we able to make the decision to go out and find somebody in the first place without the procurement policy? I'm not understanding
So-
what's different.
In the beginning, when you have that true exigent circumstance and that true emergency that you have to go out and get that single source procurement, that particular situation is such that you can't wait. You can't wait 4 weeks to get to put your RFP out there and to have people bid. So we're able to justify that in all of our documentation that we'll be presenting to FEMA. The further away that you get from the actual event, the less you're able to justify that need.
Under the emergency
Yes,
declaration.
yes.
So in the interim, while we're doing the RFP and procurement, will this other company continue to work as a debris collection service for us?
So-
Yes, no?
In new business, we'll be discussing a new emergency declaration, which would extend the local state of emergency through the end of February. Because of that, and with the appropriate documentation, we have been, again, thanks to Jason and Michelle, Jason was able to get on the phone with the Deputy Director of Recovery for GEMA, and she spoke with FEMA Legal, who was also in her building, and has provided us with information that we need to document so that we can extend that contract for a couple of week period, because our debris monitoring contract will still be in effect until March the 2nd. Our debris removal contract expires, I believe, on February the 14th. And so there would be a 10-day period where we would have no debris removal. In the extended emergency declaration that we're presenting tonight, we'll be asking you to allow us to extend that contract, especially now that we're much more comfortable that we will be reimbursed during that 10-day period
Okay.
from FEMA.
Okay, that's as clear as mud, or at least teeth.
Lawyer speak. Okay. All right.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Sorry, I couldn't be more clear.
So
Okay.
now, what do you want us to do?
Approve the RFP.
Do I have a
I
motion
want
to
you to,
approve the
yes.
RFP?
Motion to approve.
All right, do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by raising your hand. 5-0. Government business sometimes is a little harder to understand and move through. All right. Item E, public hearing. Persons desiring to speak must sign up for the appropriate application. When called, speakers must state their name and address and direct all comments to the board only. Speakers will be allotted 3 minutes to speak on their chosen topics as they relate to matters being considered by the Board of Commissioners on this agenda. No questions will be asked by any of the commissioners during citizen comments. Outbursts from the audience will not be tolerated. Common courtesy and civility are expected at all times during the meeting. The great county manager will keep time. If you hear the beeper go off,
I'm not the county manager.
county attorney, if you hear the beeper go off, please finish your comments then and step back. All right? At this time,
To speak for the proposed rezoning is.
You got to lift from the
That's right, we
table.
have to lift it from the table.
all right, do I have a motion to lift from the table?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to lift from the table and conduct a public hearing on application 2209Z. Clinton C. O'Brien and Sandra O'Brien Malloy, owners, HFG Development Agent, 480 Tomachichi Road, approximately 85.9 acres located in land lot 49 and 50 of the 3rd Land District. Applicant requests rezoning from AR1 agricultural and residential and R2 single family to C2 manufacturing.
I'll second.
All right, I have a motion to lift and a second. All those in favor signify by raising your hand. 5-0. Motion been lifted from the table.
Now,
Now,
for the proposed rezoning is Stephen Jones.
name and address, Mr. Jones. Thank you, and welcome
Chairman.
back.
Chairman, Commissioners, my name is Stephen Jones, with the law firm of Taylor English Duma. My address is 1600 Parkwood Circle, Suite 200, Atlanta, Georgia, 30339. I'm here today on behalf of the applicant, HFG. Coming today, Mr. Al Hosford, Mr. Robert Knight, their partners in the applicant, as well as our president of our civil engineer of record, Mr. John Palmer. Madam Clerk has my presentation up. As Ms. Wyndham noted, this is an application to rezone to C2 manufacturing, just over 85 acres that fronts on Highway 16, otherwise known as Arthur K. Bolton. Next slide, please. As you see, it also fronts on Tomochichi and Chi Hall Road. Consistent with your AKB overlay, this parcel is eligible for development on AKB because it has an existing curb cut, which you can see at the bottom of the screen right there. Next slide, please, Madam Clerk. Zooming in on that. Next slide, Madam Clerk. This is a view of that curb cut. This is heading towards Griffin on 16. Next slide, please. You'll see right here, this is at the intersection of Tomochichi and Chi Hall Road, where the property also has frontage. Next slide, please. This is the zoning. As with many parcels on major thoroughfares in the county, this parcel has split zoning between AR1 and R2, R2 being along the frontages, AR1 being towards the interior. Next slide, please. Looking at the comp plan, the county's comp plan, which is one of the factors in your zoning ordinance that this board considers when considering rezoning applications, designates this parcel and every other parcel along AKB that has a curb cut for employment development in the employment activity center. One of the zoning districts which is eligible is the C2. So this application does comply with your comprehensive use plan. Next slide, please. This is the most recent site plan of the property. This is also the grading profile of the property. It's important to note here that the applicant has gone through more expense to design or to put together a grading plan now to show you what that looks like to get to some of the points as to conditions on this application. And I'll highlight that in a second. But you can see the primary entrance for this is through that curb cut on AKB. There is also an auxiliary entrance and exit for circular flow of traffic on Chi Hall Road. You'll see there are truck courts on both sides of the building, and the building is designed for 1 million square feet. That 1 million square feet is important because when you have larger multinational corporations, Fortune 500, et cetera, that is a check in their checkbox that they look for when they're looking for facilities. So our target market is those larger end users. Next slide, please. This building is going to be substantially below the elevation of the adjacent roadways on Tomochichi and Chi Hall. If you look at the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, this is elevation above sea level. The intersection at Tomochichi and Chi Hall is about 808 feet above. The base elevation of the truck court is 778, so about 30 feet below. That differs as you go around the property. 808 is, of course, the high side. Next slide, please. I'll show that there. This is further down towards the east corner, where you'll see, that's Tomochichi, where you'll see the elevation of the roadway there is about 790, and the elevation of the court is at 780. So even in a low spot in the road, gets down to about 10 feet below. Next slide, please. Here's a color rendering. I'll get back to this, but we've made some modifications as this application has gone through, and I'll highlight for you those modifications. But this is just the color rendering to show you a little better visual, can be better grasp as you look at that, as opposed to a very noisy grading plan that has a lot of topographical lines on it. Next slide, please. This is just a rendering of the building, typical of what these types of buildings look like. Next slide, please. Again, some of the things we went through, Fortune 500 companies, their preference is a minimum 1 million square foot. Anything less, and it's a much less desirable facility for those larger multinational corporations. This site, based on square footage and estimates from the broker for this project, would generate between 250 to 350 jobs, ranging in pay between $18 and $35 an hour. That's average. Obviously, you'll have some managerial stuff in there, and it's obviously going to be dependent upon the end user. We also took a look at tax revenue, ad valorem tax that a building of this size would generate. We used as a comparable Renais facility in Green Valley, which has a tax appraised value at $100 a square foot. Rolling that out, extrapolating that out, using the calculator on the tax assessor's website, results in a ad valorem yearly revenue of approximately $1.4 million, which equates to about $145,000 a year per 100,000 square feet. Next slide, please. I just wanted to give you a history of this application, show you where the applicant's been, what the applicant's done, how far we've come. The applicant's done a tremendous amount of work to hear staff's input, hear the planning commission's input, hear the public's input, and try to address those and propose conditions. So I'll walk through the timeline, and then I'm going to walk you through the conditions we started with, through staff's proposal, how those conditions modified through the planning commission, the conditions that the applicant self-imposed after planning commission, after a town hall, and after a staff recommendation to try to address those concerns and get to a product that they can be proud of, and that we hope you can be proud of, that can bring industry an opportunity.
Mr. Jones, just a second. So everybody understands, there's going to be two attorneys that are going to talk. I'm sorry I didn't say this in the beginning. The attorneys that represent this they get a longer time than the 3 minutes. I want to make sure everybody understands that we haven't forgotten how the timer works and everything else. The public is a different issue, but these are the attorneys that are going to get to talk. Okay, continue.
And Chairman, related to that, I'd like to reserve time for rebuttal as well afterwards. Thank you. The applicant began discussions with staff in April 2020. Rezoning application was filed in June 3rd, 2020. Because of the size of this building, it went to Three Rivers Regional Commission as a development of regional impact. That report was issued by the Regional Commission July 26. They made no comments or recommendations. Then went before the Planning Commission, which tabled this application on August 30th so that the applicant could hold a town hall with the community. That was something the applicant welcomed to do. That town hall was held on September 7th. We came back with some revisions based on that. At the Planning Commission on November 22nd, Planning Commission made a recommendation with additional conditions, which I'll discuss in a minute. Then this commission tabled the application on December 5th because some of the residents in the area retained counsel. This board tabled so that we could meet with that counsel. We did that. We've modified the proposal even further based on that meeting, and I'll discuss that as we get through it. Next slide, please. Originally, your staff proposed 9 conditions. This was when the application originally came forward to Planning Commission. What you see up here is what we presented to the Planning Commission versus staff's conditions versus the modifications that the applicant proposed. I won't walk through all of them because they did evolve as they went through the process, but I just wanted to highlight kind of where they've been and where they're going. Staff recommended buffers along adjacent properties as well as along Tomochichi and Chihal Road. The applicant proposed to do that in 2 series and still does. One being an undisturbed buffer in the front with a planted buffer behind. That has the added protection of 1, making it look natural. 2, it does not, it preserves the vegetation. And then 3, that planted double staggered row of evergreens behind the undisturbed buffer is an additional sound barrier, as well as it's a year-round visual barrier. Staff also proposed that the curb cut on Highway 16 would be per GDOT's recommendation as to A-cell and D-cell lanes, parking islands in the truck court. All lighting would be night sky friendly, pointed downward. That's to prevent light intrusion onto adjacent properties. As well as a natural vegetation area as shown on the site plan. Solid waste disposal mechanisms, dumpsters enclosed, as well as signage approved separately. Next slide, please. So then these conditions, the applicant proposed different conditions based on staff's changed different conditions. Those became 50-foot along adjacent AR1 properties. So if you'll remember the site plan, that's on the eastern side where there's an AR parcel, as well as that 25-foot buffer around on Tomochichi and Chihal Road. The other conditions remain the same. Next slide, please. Staff, however, added an additional condition that the developer will provide measures to enforce ticketing so that trucks would not turn north onto Chee Hall Road or enter coming south on Chee Hall Road. The applicant also proposed the additional condition that there wouldn't be a curb cut on Tomochichi. And that was a condition that the applicant self-imposed based on discussions and input that we've heard from the public. Next slide, please. So this is where we are now. The applicant has proposed, or this is where we were at your last meeting. The applicant proposed even further conditions. Same as before. However, we also said to address a concern about light intrusion exiting the property, even though the building is going to be substantially below grade. We also committed to making sure that where it is above grade, if at all, that parking facilities would be oriented inwards to prevent light intrusion coming out. Next slide, please. Again, the natural buffer area and the no entrance on Tomochichi Road. We also added and proposed that the signage would be approved separately pursuant to the sign ordinance. Next slide, please. We also, the applicant self-imposed based on concern we heard about trucks traveling on Tomochichi Road or trucks traveling on Tomochichi or heading north on Chee Hall or coming south on Chee Hall. We redesigned the plan to make it impossible for trucks to make a right out to head north on Chee Hall or to make a left in while heading south on Chee Hall. And that is through an operational constraint where the truck just physically cannot make that turning radius without wrecking. As staff at that time also recommended an additional condition regarding those landscape buffers, the double staggered row of evergreen trees. Staff wanted an arborist to review those over a 3-year period. Typical industry standards about a year, but we consented to 3 just to commit to that so that screen would be there. And also, we added the condition that the vegetative buffer would be comprised of no more than 33% of the same species. And what that's important is because if you have a disease among one species, it won't travel to others. So you ensure that if you have some sort of catastrophic disease or event that happens to the buffer, the majority of it will remain. Next slide, please. Finally, we added the 17th condition and the 16th condition, and those were based on input that we heard at the town hall. That is that the Chee Hall Road entrance and exit would not line up with any existing residential driveway. That's to prevent light pollution. And then we also added a condition as well based on input that the developer or the end user would permit the installation of a traffic camera facing that Chee Hall entrance and exit to ensure that these conditions are complied with. And that would provide the county with an enforcement mechanism to ticket any offenders that don't comply with that condition. Because these conditions they are part of your zoning ordinance, so they do carry the force of law, and violation of them is a code violation, just like a violation of any other provision of your ordinances. Next slide, please. Finally, today, based on meetings that we've had with some of the community and concerns we heard about additional buffers, we went back to our engineer and were able to commit to this condition regarding average buffers. There are, as you'll see on the site plan, points where the buffer needs to be 25 foot, but in the vast majority of it, we've committed to an average buffer in all areas. So along Tomochichi and Chee Hall, that would be a minimum 25 foot, which is what we originally proposed, the 10 foot undisturbed and then the 15 foot planted behind it, but with an average buffer along those entire frontages of 50 foot. And then on properties that are adjacent and zoned AR, namely the one to the east, which is a residential tract or currently used for residential purposes, that would be a 50-foot minimum with a 75-foot average. So again, that is a much larger increase in the buffer, but for those few select points. Next slide, please. And then what I've done is I put forward on this for reference during your discussion. We have these listed, these final applicant proposed conditions as shown compared to the staff's recommended conditions. Madam Clerk, will you come forward 3 slides, or 2 slides, I believe? One more, please. One more, please. So back to the site plan, dovetailing in here. If the board has any questions, I'd be more than happy to address those now, or in rebuttal after those other folks signed up to speak for or against have had the opportunity to do so.
I am sure you'll have an opportunity. All right, yes. All right, anything else on the initial, your initial brief?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
And now, Mr. Chairman, we'll hear from Melissa Griffiths.
Good evening, Melissa Griffiths, 32 South Court Square, Noonan, Georgia, 30263. I'm here tonight on behalf of numerous Spalding County residents that are in opposition to this development. We would ask that our constitutional letter that was dated November 30th, 2022 be made a part of tonight's record. We've reviewed the rezoning application packet and all the documents that have been provided to us through numerous Open Records Act requests that have been made. We believe, based on what we have been presented, that the applicant has not met all of the county's requirements for the rezoning application and the documents that must be submitted. The initial staff report had numerous errors in it, from square footage referenced as only 100,000 square feet instead of the million square feet that the building has been from day one. This proposed inaccuracy created wrong calculations throughout the staff report, including wrong calculations regarding the parking that still exists today. The current staff report still has miscalculations in it. It says that they're 91.92 trips per day, but if you add the numbers, it's actually 372 trips per day. That's a substantial difference of more than 3 times the number that's in your current staff report that you're making decisions on. There's a stream that runs through the property, and there's much wildlife that will be affected. From the documents that have been submitted, it does not appear that the proper protections are in place. The amount of asphalt that's shown on the plans will generate a substantial amount of runoff, and the neighbors shouldn't have to be affected by this. Because as you saw on the plan, it's residences all around. It's families with small children that play in their yard, that pick up the school bus in the morning or in the afternoon, and now this proposal would allow for huge trucks coming down the road where parents are no longer going to feel like their children are safe to play in the yard. The plans do not appear to have enough detail for how many of these items will be addressed. If this is approved, it will be spot zoning. You'll be creating an island. When you look at your map, it's residential and agricultural residential properties all around. There is no commercial that is adjacent to this property. Comments by prior staff when asked of citizens' concerns were that these items would be addressed later after the rezoning. You have one chance to decide on the rezoning and to set conditions or to deny it. Once you approve their request without conditions, it's too late to try to go add these requirements to a project after the fact. The requirements should be added by either denying it or adding additional conditions tonight on the front end before you approve anything, because these will travel with the land. The current staff report has less protection for the neighbors and the taxpayers than the original staff report. The buffer keeps shrinking. The developer could even change before this project is built. A traffic study should be prepared and provided by an agreed upon professional so the traffic concerns can be addressed. There's reference in the documents that one has been performed, but no detail has been included, and none has been provided in numerous Open Records Act requests that have been made by your citizens, your taxpayers. This should be a mandatory step in the process. Their main road is on a GDOT Highway 16 route. It should be addressed. The roads that are adjacent to this proposed project cannot handle the traffic. Cheehaw Road and Tomochichi are not built for this truck traffic. They're built for the neighbors that live there and the families that are bringing their children home from school or going to church on Sunday morning. We all know that truckers that pass the entrance on Cheehaw because they may be going too fast on Highway 16 will be turning onto Tomochichi Road. So an added condition that will require the neighbors to enforce or police their streets instead of the county is just absurd. Having a camera there, the county's already overworked as is. Having a camera there where now the county has to go back and someone's got to look at pictures to see if truckers are turning on the road adds additional requirements when you're already short-staffed as is. The prior staff suggested a condition that the applicant would also help with monitoring this truck traffic. The taxpayers and residents have no authority to do that whatsoever. These are rural homes with the yards. They're not made for warehouses or for these trucks. They're not adequate buffers in place up against the residents to the project with the neighbors. While the prior proposed conditions were at a beginning point, it seems that a 100-foot undisturbed buffer next to homes with families and children is more appropriate. Condition number 2 barely allows for any buffer based on its proposed wording. The Planning Commission at their November 22nd, 2022 meeting attempted to add additional conditions. Unfortunately, they fell short because they would not allow for any public comment that night, so they could not hear from the residents. Some of the items that have never been addressed are hours of operation. How about a requirement that they can only be open from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m.? If you were one of the neighbors living there, you wouldn't want to hear the beep, 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 beep all night long of these trucks backing up. How in the world could you sleep? One of the ladies, her house is basically, it's her backyard is now going to be part of this development. Truck lights could be shining in on you all hours of the night. In the additional buffers that Mr. Jones proposed tonight, dated January 26th of 2023, we appreciate the fact that they did meet with us and try to attempt to increase their buffers. However, at that meeting, when we were looking at plans, we could see that there were places that they could have more than 100 foot of buffer that was possible in many areas, but the applicant's not willing to go that far. We're asking you all to deny it or to go that far. The neighbors and taxpayers deserve more consideration than the developers who were here to make money and move on. These residents are your taxpayers. They're the ones that have been elbow to elbow with their neighbors helping them since the tornadoes hit. They're the ones that are in the community, and they're here with their families, multi-generations, and they want to be in Spalding County, and they're here because of this atmosphere, not because of a big warehouse to be their neighbor. There will be negative impacts with this rezoning request, and so we're asking that you deny their request tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. What I'd like to do now is go through the rest of the people in the public side, and then we will have an opportunity for rebuttal from the developer side, all right? We are back to the 3-minute rule, sorry, so everybody understands the rules.
And these are all against Daryl Bishop.
Darrell Bishop, 359 Tomachichi Road. I'm opposed to the rezoning application for the Tomachichi Road project. How can the residents and the commission members be prepared on such an important decision without having access to all the information? We've been told repeatedly that we could not see anything 25 feet from the road into this property on the road right of way. Can you present my first picture here? Here you can see photos that show the distance into the wood line from the road from the site on Tomachichi Road at 359 and both my property and Anthony Bailey's. We took a 26 foot from the center of the road, then 25 feet into the woods, and this is a 25-foot measurement. Very visible, very easy to see, but we've been told repeatedly that you can't see us at that distance. The proposed warehouse is offset closest to Tomachichi, and it is evident that parking lots in the building will most likely be visible from our property, causing increased noise and added industrial noise. Let's go to the next slide here. This is at 50 feet in, and again, I took 26 from the center of the road, 50 feet into the woods. Next slide, please. Here's the next one. This was in front of my property. Next slide, please. There's the same distance, 26 feet from the center, 25 feet. And the previous slide was 50 feet in. And this is our natural vegetation. This was taken while leaves were on the trees, so it's as camouflaged as you can make it. Next slide, please. Next one. This is on, here are photos on Chee Hall Road, which will be the location for the proposed employee entrance. And this is 25 feet again, 26 from the center of the road, 25 feet. I'm not even in the vegetation yet. Next slide, please. Here I am at 50 feet, but I am behind a couple of cypress trees. Next slide, please. And this is further down Chi Hall, closer to Jerry's house. And at this distance, I'm 50 feet into the woods as well. Next slide, please. And there I am at 25 feet in, and again, I'm just touching the trees. This location, as I said, will be for the proposed employee entrance. This will add traffic and congestion onto this area that cannot be managed, and the warehouse will not be off the road very far and will do little to minimize the impact on the surrounding properties.
Thank you.
Requesting that you deny this request, please. Thank you.
Jerry McNeely.
Good evening. Jerry McNeely, 131 Chi Hall Road. I'm opposed to the rezoning of this application for Tomochichi project. In reviewing this rezoning application, documents online does not appear to have the applicant has met all the requirements. The deed's not attached. There's no meets and bounds. The application claims the project is suitable view and use of adjacent nearby properties. I can assure you that my home located at 131 Chi Hall Road is not similar to the proposed 1 million square foot home. My house sits on about 4 acres. It's 1,200 square feet. I bought this home as a retirement home. My business is just a few miles down the street. My parents is 1 street over, which is a street I grew up on. My sister's across from them. I work on tractor and trailer trucks. I can tell you all about them. I've been down this road, and when I come to the intersection of High Falls off Chi Hall, this limited sight distance, making that left turn is going to be unsafe, I promise you. I'm most concerned about losing the hometown feel that I have in Spalding County. Many of my friends and neighbors suffered losses from this recent storm. Our community pulled together, worked elbow to elbow to assist each other, and those we didn't even know showed up. Big businesses will not continue this hometown feeling. It was small business owners like myself and several others here tonight that went to the neighborhoods and communities to work together. That is why I made Spalding County my hometown. I was born and raised here, graduated in '93. I do not want this development to be approved. As a resident of Spalding County, I'm very concerned that this project does not meet the intended future land use map for this residential agricultural area. The conditions should be more stringent against the applicant to protect these residents. As a resident of Spalding County, I ask that you vote no on the rezoning. I also want to give y'all thanks for everything that y'all did for the tornado and our fire chief or whoever that did the number, setting up for people to call. It's amazing people down there. I got to work with them, and I appreciate what they did. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McNeely.
Anthony Bailey. Anthony Bailey.
My name is Anthony Bailey, 313 Tomochichi Road. I'm opposed to the rezoning application for Tomochichi Road project. The staff report and concept plan use different information from the parking space count. The amount of asphalt for this project is very concerning regarding the amount of runoff. The plan clearly shows a mandatory stream buffer. There is a stream on the property. Has this wildlife or stream itself going to be protected? It's, you know, you saw earlier, my bent mailbox was 313 Tomochichi Road, and you saw the buffer there. And this is where me and my wife live and want to live, for a long time. And the buffer for that is not even close. I mean, 25 feet, you don't even touch the trees, as you saw earlier. It's very disheartening, and I mean, I'm a business owner in this town. I mean, I had my employees on Saturday night. We were out delivering tacos to people. We're a community.
Thank you.
And I want to see it stay that way. And I want to see the measurements done correctly. I'm a business owner, I understand business, and I want us to see it done the right way. But I just don't think this is being done the right way. So, if you guys will consider that and turn this down, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey.
Dina Roberson Ray.
Hi, my name is Dina Robertson Ray. I live at 73 Parham Road. The first thing I would like to do is thank Spalding County for their helpless efforts for all the residents in this county during the devastation during this tornado. I also want to thank the volunteers and small businesses for devoting their time, helping and contributing to our community. I love to see a small town full of love and compassion, and I'm proud to say we are Spalding Strong. I want to thank Jerry McNeely and his staff at Hagar Diesel for all the work that they did for our community. God will truly bless them. I am, as well as the 97% of the people in this room, in opposition of the rezoning application for the Tomochichi Road project. We met with the developer, discussed some negotiable conditions, and none of those were even considered tonight. We are concerned about the traffic on Chihal Road. Commissioners, please deny this request so that the developer has to look at the available property for a second entrance on High Falls Road, which you may clearly see on page 93 in the agenda packet on the lower right corner of the land use summary map. A second entrance in the middle of homes with children playing in the yard is not what is in the best interest of the residents in this area. A 1 million square foot warehouse appears to exceed a C2 zoning designation. The county comprehensive plan, future land use map tiers, and development threshold clearly show a building in excess of 400,000 square feet is a commercial F or industrial F designation. The staff report does not include this information. There are no references on the plans as to the height or dimensions of the building other than the square footage. This does not meet the application processes. In the staff report, the criteria to be considered states the request as proposed is consistent with the future land use map for this property, with the approval of a master planned commercial use. Where is the master planned commercial use? How can a 1 million square foot warehouse not be called an industrial? The applicant should have to abide by the county and state rules and ordinances. The condition should be focused on protecting the county and the neighbors, not just the applicant. So we are asking all of you to please deny this rezoning application. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Ray.
David Lynch.
Hello, David Lynch, 185 North Walker's Mill Road, 1/8 of a mile from this property in consideration. I'm opposed to the rezoning application of Tomochichi Road project. In reviewing the rezoning application, it does not appear that the applicant has met all of the requirements per the application checklist. The application claims that the proposed project is consistent with the development trend in the surrounding area. I'm not sure about that. There are no 1 million square foot warehouse proposed in the same area adjacent to the properties that are zoned as this packet requests. These are residential and agricultural zoning classifications on all three sides. I believe
David, can you get the microphone a little closer to you, or yes?
Sorry about that. I believe more research needs to be applied to the traffic issues that'll potentially come about. Chihal Road and Tomochichi Road were not built for such truck traffic. Even with their improvements, it just won't work. In the original staff report, the numbers of trip referenced only 100,000 square foot warehouse, not 1 million square foot. There'll be a huge difference in traffic counts from 100,000 to 1 million square foot warehouse, especially according to seeing what the personnel parking lot number they have. The updated staff report says 177. She already spoke about that, 194 trips PM. That's wrong. Bump it up to where there's parking planned for 350 employees, 394 trucks. That's a big, very, very big difference. I think these the traffic impact ambiguities need to be corrected before this project proceeds forward. The developer should be responsible for all the costs associated with traffic improvements. And that's not an unheard of thing for a county to require developers to do that, mind you. The conditions should be more stringent against the applicant to protect the residents. As a resident of Spalding County, I ask that you vote no on this rezoning application. Another big, large item I'd like to bring to your attention is there's no public sewer, and we don't know when that might come about. I would bet 5, 8, maybe 10 years. If you started today, it'd be 3 years before you could get sewer out there probably. You've got to buy the right of way to begin with before you run the pipe. Well, just consider a few numbers. If you have 300 or 400 car parking spots, 300 or 400 employees, 24/7, year-round, if you flush 3 times, that's approximately 10 gallons per person. You're bumping up, you get well over 10,000 gallon septic system, okay? The tanks are one thing to hold the waste.
Thank you, Mr. Lynch. We appreciate it.
You need 40 acres of septic drain field site, potentially.
Gerald Bailey.
My name's Gerald Bailey. I live at 2724 High Falls Road in Griffin, and I've lived on High Falls Road since January of 1968 when I received my discharge from the military. I was a conscripted person, didn't want to go, but I did go, and I was proud to come back to Griffin. Now, I got a script here that I know I could read off, but as I look at all these things that throwing at you guys and putting us under the load, I see that as I drive down Tomachichi Road, there are brand new houses, some probably worth $2-3 million. There are also further on down the road, people that have been living there for 45, 50 years and have enjoyed a life there, not encumbered by a lot of heavy-duty traffic, pollution that's going to be generated, traffic problems that are going to erupt. If you go out right on High Falls Road and you take Walker's Mill Road and Cheehaw Road and all these other roads, if you'll look and drive on them, you have got to memorize where all the potholes are. When I go Walker's Mill Road over to Jackson Road, I'm looking and I'm thinking, oh God, where's that big hole I ran over last night? And and I'm looking at my tires, and I look under my car and see and then when over 600 parking spaces out here in a place that I heard today that there's another application going in for another 1 million square foot warehouse. Another one's going to be right in that general area, and we're going to be having tons and tons and tons of vehicles going honk, honk. You know, kids are going to get a lot of fun out of pulling on that old horn and hearing that horn. But there's a horn that's got to be tooted tonight, and I pray that you are the ones who make that toot, and let's deny this. You know, I would say maybe let's take it and look at it again one more time to see, you know, all this stuff they're saying and doing. And they talk about foliage. What's foliage going to be? Is it going to be nice grass that's been cut and brought in on a tractor trailer? Or are we going to get kudzu out there? Is that going to be our foliage? You know, I say tonight, you know, look upon these people here who have lived there 50 years. I've lived in my house. My father-in-law was a builder, and I lived in 4 houses side by side. You know, we raised 5 boys. We've been blessed with them. Anthony's one, very smart guy. He's done well. But I say tonight, for you guys to stand up and toot your horn tonight and make sure this is defeated. We don't need this one, and we sure don't need another one down the road. I didn't read my script. I'm sorry, folks.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey.
We're standing together. Thank you very much.
Nicole Kimball.
I'll say it again.
Nicole Kimball.
Good evening. My name is Nicole Kimball, 282 Tomachichi Road.
Welcome.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
No one is entitled to a rezone. So this is something I heard from a commissioner in another county this past week, and it had me wondering, does Spalding County believe that? And I'm sorry to say that the experience our community has had thus far with the developers, and honestly, I'm sorry, with the Planning and Development Committee, makes it seem that maybe they believe that someone is entitled to a rezoning. The Planning and Zoning Committee forwarded to you an application with a lot of loose ends and inaccuracies. They actually told me themselves that they were grossly unemployed back in the town hall meeting in September. I'd just like for you to consider that when we talk about the fact of moving forward with something so significant and impactful without full knowledge of what we're really doing. But we're saying that we want this in the name of growth, and growth is necessary and it's imminent for this property. It's going to happen, and we're ready for that. We understand that. But growth for the sake of growth is the ideology of the cancer cell. That was said by Edward Abbey. I'd love for you to consider that when we think about these loose ends and inaccuracies in this application. The plan in place at the time of this application provides pictures of what was envisioned for the corridor. It has a picture of a lovely home in a lovely neighborhood with a business park atmosphere, small office buildings with employee parking. There is not one tractor trailer truck in those pictures. There is nothing that resembles a 1 million square foot distribution center in those pictures. Just using those pictures alone is argument that this is not the vision for the corridor. Using this little relative toe sliver of AKB frontage on this property when the mass of this is surrounded by an established residence or neighborhood, it's absurd. It's an absurd interpretation of what the intent of this plan was and what the vision for the corridor was. So we're talking about 24-hour per day noise, air, and traffic pollution. How does that compare to the pictures that we're seeing of this lovely home? What home is going to be built in that environment? I was hoping also that you would consider both immediate and long-term effects of this rezoning request. We saw what the developer presented tonight, and I'm not so sure that this potential additional tax revenue is worth the degradation to this neighborhood and to this county, honestly. Distribution centers of this size typically hire part-time, low-wage employees who may not even be Spalding residents. I haven't seen any empirical data showing that this development will deliver the benefits problem. Again, growth for the sake of growth is the ideology of the cancer cell. I don't want the Henry County cancer cell here. I'd love for you to consider
Thank you, Ms.
what it deserves. Please deny this request.
Jonathan Shakespeare.
Jonathan Shakespeare. I'm a 335 West Ponce de Leon in Decatur, but I represent Billy Kimball and his wife Pat. And I'm an unpaid representative, so I don't have any money or any financial stake in this, but I'm here to encourage you to consider rejecting the application. I'm a CPA. I was certified in 1979, and I've represented commercial developers, including Patilla Construction Company, Stone Mountain Industrial Park, Rockdale Industries, DeKalb Industries, et cetera. And they've developed over 100 million square feet. And the developers have a saying, water is silver, sewer is gold. Somebody just took my thunder. We got 350 people. I think that's a fantasy. We haven't heard that before. But how big of a septic field are you going to have to handle that? That's the first. I think what we're dealing here with is a pure speculation. We have the O'Briens who inherited the property. They want to sell it with a stepped-up basis, pay no income tax. They've offered an option, and that's all it is. The developer does not own the property. They continue to extend, excuse me, the options as they go through the litany of discovery. So they don't own it. They don't have the money to buy it. They don't have a tenant. There was rumor, or actually the development department said there was a tenant, but they couldn't disclose. There's no tenant. There's no bank loan. Since it started, rates have doubled. Has anybody seen the financial proposals? They don't have the wherewithal. If the county, excuse me, were going to build a road, they would have a bonding process. What's the process here to assume that the process will be completed? The worst case is you rezone it and they back out. The next worst case is you rezone it, they do some grading, cut the trees down, and then bail. The next is they build it, spec, they can't find a tenant, the bank forecloses. What assurance do you have that these folks are going to be able to complete that? We're talking about a lot of money. It's $2 million for the land. I know because I've talked to the O'Briens. So what happens after that? What evidence do you have? The developer told me personally they've never done anything of this size. Never. Are you taking a leap of faith? Have you looked at their financials? Those are rhetorical questions you need to ask. But start with the septic field. Where is that going to go? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Shakespeare.
Kay Wimpy.
Good evening, I'm Kay Wimpy at 164 South Walkers Mill Road. The homeowners of this community want this denied. Rezoning this for this building, 394 truck bays, 4 trucks per day, 1 gallon of gasoline or diesel is 35,270 pounds of CO2. You have already approved 13 other buildings within a 1 mile radius for 8,752 more trucks, which is 195,869 pounds of CO2 per day within a mile radius. Not only air pollution, noise pollution, but you are fixing to increase this county's drug trafficking, human trafficking with these distribution centers. Also, do these residents have to put up with commercial trucks parked along their roads all night, during the night, waiting for this building, waiting to go through? Go to 75 and see the trucks on the interstate, all up and down the road and parking. They should not have to put up with this. I keep hearing that your overlay is because DOT built 16 and said, if we build it, you make it commercial. Where is your written agreement with Georgia DOT that says you got to make it commercial because we built this? This piece of property is not a good plan for commercials. Questions I have. Why are we approving rezoning based on just concept plans? You've already done 13 concept buildings, 3 of them over $1 million, 1 being over $2 million. Are we doing these buildings with no sewage? These are massive buildings. So do we plan to rape the homeowners and the taxpayers to pay to run sewage to these buildings? The last zoning committee, the public was not allowed to speak. The zoning board had several questions. Zoning wasn't asked, couldn't say, but Ms. Littlefield got to be the speaker for the planner of this building, while we, as the public who live in this community, were not allowed to have any comment or say anything. Why are we approving this with only a 25-foot buffer? At least with the other ones, you did a 100-foot buffer for all of those buildings. How is the water source running through this property going to be protected? Why are we even allowing entrances on Chi Hall and Tomochichi Road? Those are rural roads that cannot take this traffic. There are already multiple empty buildings within a 10-mile radius that are empty for quite some time. This building, and it appears that there was...
Thank you, Ms. Wimpy.
Okay. My last thing I'll say, you raise our taxes enough, stop taking our quality of life. Deny this building.
Joe Bill.
Good evening, I'm Joe Beal, 614 Swint Road. I'm going to read a quote from a wise man first to put some perspective in here, and then I'm going to give you a different perspective for this group. It has been said by one years ago that history turns on small hinges, and so do people's lives. Our lives will depend upon the decisions we make. For decisions determine destiny. And that was Thomas S. Monson. Excuse me. A year ago, my wife and I began our process of deciding where we wanted to live in Georgia. We looked from the South Carolina border all the way to Alabama, all the way up north. In my previous life, I have some real estate experience with our family brokerage firm back west. I knew how to use my phone and access your county codes, your zone planning maps, land utilization, future planning, the county assessor tax. I could get all the information. And I'll tell you that when I first accessed the 2017 map, the dotted blue line concerned me because I didn't know what that meant. And it was hard to get into the details of it, and that's just a back office thing. But it was a problem. Now for me, I wasn't concerned because the property I was considering here was down on the county line, far enough away from this mess, or so I thought. The county is responsible for this disappointment to the citizens because the 2017 map was not effective. It was not a good representation of what was going to be happening over the next 5 years, and they own that. So much so, I think it's the TRCC report that was discussed, second paragraph, third line, all the way at the end. They tell you, said, well, we went and looked at the zoning map, and as far as we could tell, and this was 2019, their map, they couldn't update it because they didn't understand what it was those dotted dash lines meant. The citizens have an obligation to be engaged and informed. But based on that information that was provided, one would reasonably assume that it would be similar to what's on 1941. However, when the county released that map, it should have known, if it did not know, that the DOT wasn't going to allow the access to populate that in that manner. That's a problem. Now, another great man taught me when I was young, the character matters, and trust is given based off of the character that's exhibited. Now, the council presented earlier, unfortunately I can't finish, the records
you,
don't
Mr.
reflect
Vail.
what the council has provided. Give us the bare minimum to the standard. Thank you.
All right, can we have the attorney, Stephen Jones, come back up? Do you have any other comments after you listen to the citizens of Spalding County?
Thank you, Chairman. Accompanied by John Palmer, in case the board has any specific questions regarding the engineering or design of this facility. We heard quite a bit in opposition to this application. I'll be brief in my response so that I can take the time to address any questions that the board may have. But I do want to reiterate a couple things. Number one, the comprehensive plans designation of AKB has been in, for industrial and commercial development, has been in place for decades. The county's overlay along Arthur K. Bolton Parkway presumes and was adopted based on its own text with the intent to promote such development. The questions about things such as stormwater, sewer, buffers, those are all addressed in your development code, and they must be complied with, and many of those things are also addressed in state law, and they are complied with at the time of land disturbance permit. The application before you right now is about zoning of a parcel. Design and all those other issues come at land disturbance permitting. They come when the engineering is done. However, just like any zoning, any development, it follows that process. And when it gets there, those items are handled. Before you tonight is the question of zoning. And when you consider that, you consider the factors set out in your ordinance. Foremost is the comprehensive plan. Your staff and your planning commission reviewed that and those factors, and they both recommended approval. To address concerns, the applicant has come forward and self-imposed a plethora of conditions We started with 9, we're now at 17, many of which the applicant self-imposed. There were many issues raised about issues with the application and this and that, but no specifics about it. The application is complete. Some of that information may not have been published online, but it is in the file, and it was tendered with the application. So, we would ask you to vote consistent with your comprehensive plan, vote consistent with your planning commission's recommendation, vote consistent with those other rezonings, similar rezonings, one directly across Highway 16, approved earlier this year, and make the consistent decision to zone this property as it's been planned to be developed for decades. With that, there are a number of other things that I could go into rebuttal, but I'd like to take the opportunity to address any specific questions the board may have. And again, Mr. Palmer's with me to address any specific design concerns you may have.
I do have a question. Well, first thing I want to say is that as a commissioner, and I can't speak for the whole board, we have not done what we needed to do. That's the first thing, because I've been on this board 18 years, and since I have been here, Arthur K. Bolton has been zoned and intentioned to be industrial, all the way out to 16, even though that goes into Butts County. One of the unintended consequences of this, especially on Arthur K. Bolton, is that we have residential areas on the backside of that. We have not addressed that in our ordinance. Actually, this is probably the first time that we've actually been confronted with this. And so as a result, based on what we have approved, which, you know, I realized at first it was a 10-foot buffer. You know, I'm almost 10 feet long, well, 6, 5. Anyway, but I'm saying that's so I'm saying all that to say this. We have not done what we needed to do it because of the unintended consequences associated with this. I don't have a problem at all with the expanded buffers because the applicant has gone beyond what our ordinance asked for. We should be asking for more. We can ask for more, but I think that, for me, in this case, they've gone beyond what we said. The only rub that I have with this is traffic on Cheehaw Road. I just don't, I mean, I can't say, you know, I wish you could draw this over or your entryway should all be on the front, but I'm very uncomfortable with that. That is the only part of this that I'm uncomfortable with. I heard someone make a comment about, I forget, maybe it was Mr. Bailey, measuring. Well, on Cheehaw Road, when I went out and measured, my assumption is that the buffer begins at the property. So that's beyond the right-of-way. So that's where the measurement starts. And if you're on Cheehaw Road, and if there is 15 or 20 feet from where the right-of-way ends to the roadway, and the roadway is 25 to 30 feet, and you have a buffer on the other side, and you have a yard, clearly, even on Cheehaw Road, that's 100 feet. So you're not right in the light. So, but cars driving on the road, specifically big trucks coming in and out. It's a big place. It's a lot of trucks that, you know, I don't care if you fix the road, that still is not gonna stop the traffic problem. That's the only problem I have with that. I've read through it. I shared with you, I have a problem with the property that's up in the corner. I felt like that buffer should be extended as much as possible because those people's property is right up onto that. But, you know, in terms of the other items that many people spoke about, we don't determine the sewer. You know, that's a sewer and water authority thing, and if they can't get sewer there, then they can't do it. But that's not what we're here tonight doing. They may look at this and realize that, well, if I've got to have a septic tank, it's got to be on the other end. Because as I look at this, if the elevations are all in the middle, then that means the water is gonna run down in the middle. I mean, that's what I'm thinking. So yeah, but those are developmental things that have to be approved as the process goes on. Like I said, I just needed to understand where the buffers began. And I agree with the gentleman. Yes, you're not gonna get a forest in there. But I would be interested to know where the undisturbed buffer begins, because if the property is at .1 and then you have to go 25 feet before you find a tree,
Right.
then yeah,
And that's an undisturbed buffer of grass, that's not.
right. So those are the kind of things where I would say maybe there might be some room for tweaking, but our ordinance does not require us to do that because we have not done what we needed to do. So yeah, that's just kind of what I wanted to say. Like I said, I totally get it. If it was my house, I mean, I live on High Falls Road, and there's big trucks out there every day, and I know that the noise is there. Yes, I've gotten used to it, but that doesn't make it right. But on this end, what I can say is that my grandson can't play out in my front yard. And so, yeah, I just have some concerns about that exit being on Cheehaw Road. If there were an approval for this, it would be an issue for me.
Okay, let's go through the rest of the commissioners.
Okay, I'd like to start. And I can definitely understand what Commissioner Flowers-Taylor expressed about, what this would be like to bring this type of facility into your neighborhood. I totally understand that. But I want to focus a little bit more and hone down here on the economic impact, because I think that's very important. As commissioners sitting here, that's also part of the job that we have to look at, overseeing the citizens and the tax base. Stephen, you mentioned 1.4 tax revenue, and you also mentioned about 250 and 350 employees possibly. And I don't know if you can tell me this right now, but what does that look like? I mean, are we even at the point of we're talking about like benefits, salaries? What does all of that bring? What does that mean, dollar amount, that could be that economic impact of this community? That's a lot of folks, and that could be that's thriving for a lot of people when you talk about what they could do to a community. Can you tell me what that looks like?
Yes, Commissioner, absolutely. So this building, the economic impact in terms of ad valorem tax is based on the proposed square footage of the building. That is based on comparable buildings in the county, industrial buildings that have been developed, and the value that the tax assessor has assigned to them. We distilled that, plugged it into the tax assessor's calculator, which you take value of the building, plug it in, and it spits out a value of the improvements. And that would result in an approximate $1.4 million yearly ad valorem increase. As to the jobs and what specifically they would be, that calculation is based on an industry standard that our broker tells us as to the types of businesses that would go into this facility. We're aiming, as I said, with the size of the building, to attract Fortune 500 larger, higher caliber companies that would be at this facility. They will select the site based on the conditions that you impose and the resulting plan that is reduced. So when it gets to the time of permitting and gets to later stages in the development cycle, that will then attract the end user, which will bring in the resulting jobs. So the specific jobs and benefits, we are unsure of at the moment, but the 1 million square foot building gets you to companies that have a higher standard of not only pay, but also benefits, quality, and longevity. So that is what we're targeting, and that is the market that we're targeting.
Okay. I just want to clarify that, because I want the board to use, as we know, not even 4 months ago, we were sitting here, maybe same crowd, different crowd, battling whether or not we were going to raise taxes, raise the millage rate. And our job here is to sit here and fight to make sure we don't do that or try not to do that, because we know how our tax base is. So the concerning part for me is that not bringing in a facility like this is a hindrance overall to the community when it comes to, when you look at the millage rate and taxes. So we know that we have a very tight budget. We know what that looks like for us. So, that's something that we have to consider in the long run.
Okay. Commissioner Dutton?
Yeah.
Excuse me, Commissioner.
Just sitting here looking at the plans myself, I just see a lot of flaws that I don't like. Number one would be the entrance onto Chi Hall. That's a big no-no. I mean, that's going against our ordinance from the get-go, no trucks on the county roads. I mean, we're in the process of trying to get our roads in order, and like you said, have down Grand Canyon potholes there, and that's our whole goal is get all that fixed. Another one, I just don't like the septic area designed on here across the creek. I mean, a lot can go wrong between there and the buildings. You know, Exxon Valdez spilled turds down through there, it wouldn't do good in there, you know. I don't like it. I mean, there could be a lot of more tweaking on this. I mean, it's just a lot to it. I don't like it.
Okay. Commissioner Flowers Taylor, did you have?
Okay, I'm concerned about the allegations that our information from our staff is not correct. That is concern for me, and if there is incorrect information on here that is our responsibility, I think it should be fixed. Our boo-boo is not the applicant's boo-boo, but I agree that if there's wrong language on here, it doesn't need to be approved without it being correct. So that's the first thing. Am I saying no, that I disagree with this, or that I don't think that the applicant should have the approval? No, I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying that if all the verbiage is not correct that we put on there, it needs to be fixed.
Yeah.
Commissioner Dutton?
Can we?
Can you speak into the mic? Make sure. Thank you.
Can we check on that and make sure? I know several people brought up the size of the parking lot change, the size of the square foot. Now that might have just been a clerical error on the page, but we were calculating like we should have been. We just wrote the wrong number down. Can we double check on that? I mean, have we gone since Miss Littlefield's exit and
We have not gone back and checked those. From my knowledge, to my knowledge, I was informed that this was good to go. But if we have to go back and look at it again, we most definitely can.
the other industrial parks, the other industrial zones near this, have we required a 100-foot barrier on those?
I really can't speak off the top of my head. I know we rezoned one on High Falls Road, but to be honest, I don't remember the buffers on those to be complete.
Neither do I,
Yeah, because those were approved at the beginning or mid last year. We had two, right? So I can't remember off the top of my head.
I know that the one that we did next to the lakes at Green Valley, we just attached all the rules for the lakes at Green Valley and all the green requirements that were there. But I don't exactly remember how long the buffer was.
Let's see. Newton, can you talk to this, please?
As y'all know, I have a conflict in this and can't discuss it substantively. Well, I would have to check, Commissioner Dutton, the exact buffer that was required on the property development across the road, with which I did not have a conflict, but it was part of the conditions and part of their site plan. I believe Mr. Palmer may know because I think he was the engineer on that property.
What, Mr. Palmer?
He's
In the
coming
doorway.
for.
Okay, come on.
So when that, John Palmer with Falcon Design, when that one came through, we had 50-foot buffers. We had, it's the same exact condition, 10-foot undisturbed, 40 disturbed and replanted if it was disturbed. So that's what was on the same site plan for the one across the street.
That was one that we had the big berm requirement, right? For the people that were contiguous to the south of it? Wasn't that?
That's correct.
That's correct. There was a berm requirement.
Okay.
So,
I agree though about the road on Chi-Hawk.
yeah,
And-
so there's no 100-foot buffer.
And I can also clarify one of the questions about the buffers. You're correct. We all assumed that everybody assumes that their property starts kind of at the edge of the pavement. But on Chi-Hawk and Tomochichi, the right-of-way is actually 80 feet. So the property doesn't start until 40 feet back into the property from the center line. That's where the buffers would start. And the way it's written is if, there is a picture, and it's true, on Cheehaw, there's an area that is on the property of the building, but it is grass. So that area would actually be replanted. It wouldn't just be left as grass undisturbed. We'd have to replant it with 2 staggered rows of evergreen trees to create that buffer where it doesn't exist.
And now your plan shows that staggered row, double staggered row of, on everywhere where, so on to the,
It's all the way around it.
yeah, all the way around except for the 16 side, effectively.
Correct.
And the High Falls Road, I guess, that little edge.
That's correct. So we've,
'Cause that's just woods.
yes, there's a double staggered row all the way around the whole property. And that's to create that visual stream.
And one more point to note, it's that in the recommended conditions, there are 2 additional conditions that address that double staggered row of evergreens that would surround all road frontages and adjacent properties. And that is that it's made up of no more than 1/3 of one type of species, and that an arborist would review and keep an eye on it for at least 3 years to make sure it is established and maintained and that it reaches a healthy level or reaches maturity or establishment. So it's not just that undisturbed buffer that we talked about of the trees that you saw pictures of. Behind that, in addition, is a double staggered row, a checkerboard of evergreen trees. So it's
That's more than we require from anybody else.
it's a double effect. And then the building is also substantially below that replanted buffer of double staggered rows. So you have a combined effect of the building being below grade, and then when it reaches road grade, there being the remaining undisturbed buffer to leave the visual effect along the roadway, as well as that planted buffer behind. So it's a triple effect.
So I don't know, I can't remember the name of the property owner that is in the northeast quadrant. When I look at that little design, there is, where it makes its right angle, 90-degree angle, there's very little, I mean, there's no buffer.
Well, there.
I mean, it looks like there would be no buffer.
On this one, it actually, it has a little arrow and says wall.
Correct. So we have
Tell me about
two, there's, John can speak to the wall, but that buffer along that residential tract is proposed to be, that's the average one that's 75 average. So we've proposed to increase that to an average 75. You'll see where that wall is, which John can discuss. That's where it would get into the minimum requirement that we've discussed. But everywhere else, you would have the natural plus the replanted. And then below the wall, you've obviously got below grade, a natural berm or, subterranean.
Okay, yeah, I see that.
Sorry.
Yeah, so we, in that exact area during the town hall meeting, the family came forward and we talked with the developer and they have agreed to actually install the wall to give them the full 50 foot in that area, because back then I think it was 40 or 25 and it was actually graded, but we backed it off and there's an actual probably a 15-foot wall there to keep this buffer as big as possible at that point.
So this would be like a retention wall to keep,
Because the building is 30 feet below their house at that point.
So they will have some sound barrier as well as the vegetation.
So there is 810 elevation at their house, and the parking lot is about 780. So the actual finished floor, and we're talking very exact numbers at this point. That's getting into final design and engineering and construction documents. The building may fluctuate a little bit here or there, but to balance the property for a grading perspective, it's not gonna change much from the site that you see. But again, we're talking exact numbers. I don't wanna confuse everybody and say that this is exactly what the building elevation will be, but should be close to those numbers.
I still have the issue with the road on Sheehow.
Okay, let's get this down. We have really two questions, right? We have the road question, which is the primary issue, and then we have the barrier question. The rest of the stuff appears to meet the standards we're talking about. All right, Mr. Jones, road and barrier. Those are the two questions we're haggling over. Would your
client be interested in looking at putting an entryway, coming in and coming out instead of coming out on Chee-Haw Road?
Only on 16.
Well, yeah, I'm just saying, you know, you look at so many other places in the industrial parks, and the trucks go in one way, and then the trucks come out the same way. And you do have that entryway, and you have a circular driveway, so, you know, maybe if you could come in and out the same way, you wouldn't have to go on Chee-Haw Road. I mean, if that would be something, for me, that would be okay. I mean, I'm not doing what everybody wants, but the biggest thing that I'm hearing people say is that we don't want any trucks driving on Chee-Haw Road because you got kids, family, blah, 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 blah. If you keep the trucks off Chee-Haw, you can keep the trucks off Tomochichi. You can keep the trucks off Parham. So, and you don't have to worry about putting a traffic camera or any of that. So that would do it for me, other than the language that we need to get right in the document. So would you go
How
back
about-
and ask your guy about that, your people?
Yeah, how about barrier? Let's talk about barriers. I mean
The
buffer,
buffers.
excuse me. I'm sorry, wrong word.
I was gonna get Ms. Gibson to back up a couple slides to, two more, please. So as to buffer, this is what we've proposed, and this is the expanded buffer above what staff initially recommended. And it was in response to concerns we heard. So number one, there should be a 50-foot minimum buffer and a 75-foot average buffer along all properties contiguous, i.e. not separated by a road, with the subject property and zoned AR1. And that is, Commissioner Flowers Taylor, the parcel that you were referencing.
And Tomochichi?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, Commissioner. So that would be the 50-foot minimum, 75-foot average. The 50 being necessary to get that wall to bring it below grade, which is another form of sound abatement.
Excuse me, Stephen, do we know if the right-of-way is 80 feet on Tomochichi like it is on, it's the same, so you'll still have that distance?
And Commissioner, just to clarify, number one would only apply along that property line. Condition number two would apply along the road frontages of Tomochichi and Chee-Haw. So that would be along all road frontages on Tomochichi Road and Chee-Haw Road. There shall be a 25-foot minimum buffer and a 50-foot average buffer, which at a minimum shall consist of 10-foot undisturbed and a 15-foot planted buffer. Next slide, Ms. Gibson.
So, wait a minute, so where would the 10-foot undisturbed buffer and 40-foot planted buffer, where would that go?
Commissioner, I'm sorry, there was,
What, the 10-foot undisturbed buffer and the 40-foot planted buffer, where does that go?
at the property line. So you start at the property line and you would have 10-foot, you'd have your applicable.
But it's lined with what property?
Oh, condition 2 is along the road frontages.
No. So in condition 1, it says, which buffer at minimum shall consist of a 10-foot undisturbed buffer and a 40-foot planted buffer. But just above that, in condition 1, says there should be a 50-foot minimum buffer with a 75 average buffer. So there's two of those in there, two minimums. So tell me where the at minimum shall consist of a 10-foot undisturbed buffer and a 40-foot planted buffer. Where would that be? What buffer is that?
That's along that property to the east, that residential tract that Commissioner Flowers Taylor was discussing. Ms. Gibson, would you
Northeast corner. There's one family that's
Going back.
contiguous with his property.
Correct. Forward one, Ms. Gibson. So on that, at the top of the page, that's what we're talking about right now in that condition number 1. That property that makes a dog leg, where you
That's
see the
the
wall.
75.
That's the adjacent.
No. That's the 10 and 40-foot buffer.
No, that one on the left side. Yeah, that's one house right in that corner, and they're going to put the wall up in that right angle, but the buffer around there is 75 foot. Then if you come down to on the left side, that's Tomochichi. And he's saying that there's a 25-foot, minimum 25-foot buffer that can go up to 50
The 50 average, correct. So it,
on Tomochichi and, what's Chee-Haw?
yes,
Chee-Haw.
yes, Commissioner.
Is
And
that
the-
language not clear?
Why? Please. Please, guys, we really don't want to have to ask anybody to leave. Please. So, So help me out, why are we doing, can we go back to number 1 there?
Forward one, please.
Forward one. So there shall be a 50-foot minimum buffer and a 75-foot average buffer along properties contiguous.
There's only,
AKA not separated by a road. There's only one of those.
Correct.
And then we come down and we say, actually, that buffer is going to be 10-foot undisturbed and 40-foot planted.
At a
So-
minimum, because we want to account for the double staggered row.
So, but why are we saying there shall be a 50-foot minimum buffer?
So at that wall that
Oh,
Mr.
I
Palmer
see.
discussed.
So, and that includes a 10-foot undisturbed and 40-foot. That's that 50-foot minimum.
Correct. But then if you drew tape from the property line to the end of the buffer and took the average of that across that entire buffer, that average has to equal at least 75 foot in all areas.
That makes sense. Okay.
And it was done that way because there are all those few points where it has to pinch
it's very
down.
tight.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But the applicant wanted to do that to increase it everywhere else it possibly could.
Where is the planted buffer defined as a
One
double
slide
staggered row of evergreens? And does that specify not only with the double staggered line, but how far apart they need to be so we can actually use them to block sight and not just make it a picket fence effect?
Correct. So condition 12 that we proposed, that a planted buffer shall consist of a staggered double row of evergreens consisting of no more than 33% of the same species. And in areas where the internal parking facilities are at or above roadway, a planted berm to improve sound reduction. So the double staggered row, they have to be tight enough to create that visual barrier. And that's the point of the double staggered row. If you plan them side by side, no matter what, there's going to be gaps. But if they're
Right.
double staggered in a checkerboard, that's what creates the visual wall.
Well, again, hate to be the lawyer in the room, but like, if it doesn't specify exactly how close or far away those are, you could plant one on this side of the room and one on that side of the room, and it would still be a double staggered line, and yet there's 40 foot between them. You see what I'm saying? So without it actually specifying that these then have to touch so that there's an actual sight barrier, like, then it's not specified that that's what's happening to happen. That might be our intention, but as we all know in contract law, unless it's written down, it doesn't exist. So is there a way to actually get that in here? Because I think that's the intent.
Yes,
But if
Commissioner.
it's not there, you guys are gonna sell it, I trust you guys, but if you sell it to somebody else or somebody,
We want
this
the
goes south or whatever.
specifics, The specifics.
So you've already got a staff recommended condition for an arborist to preside over it for 3 years. What you could do is you could add to that condition that the arborist shall preside over the planting to ensure that the spacing, the centers of the trees, is sufficient to create that visual barrier.
But we could,
Commissioner, you could say the arborist or landscape architect, because at the time of land disturbance permit, you will have a landscaping plan submitted, which
Mr.
Mr.
Harris, you
Palmer's
can't do
firm.
that. Newton, he can't do that.
Frank,
Frank,
I got it.
okay? Thank you. All right, so we have two issues. One, we can ask what you're gonna do about the road. Two, we've got a staffing paper issue that we need to resolve. And three, we've got a wording issue that we want on the
Description of the buffer,
the buffer.
the planet buffer.
Yes, all right. Now, we cannot, does anybody believe we can approve the staffing words when they're incorrect?
I don't, if,
We don't know they're incorrect, but I would certainly like to check before we do anything to make sure that they're correct. I'm not saying but that's an issue that.
I mean,
would-
since there
would
are
be
so many allegations about
Oop.
misinformation in the packet, because what we see here tonight is probably something different than they have been seeing over this past 8 or 9 months. But as long as that language has not made it into here, I think we just need to be verified that that's what it is.
Secondarily, to me, this is the first time we're doing this, really and truly, and this is,
We want to get
we want to do it exactly right. We're trying to make sure that this model is what we're going to use in the future. So, yes, we're doing some things that may say, table, hold up, we're concerned, but the reason we're doing those is so that when we get this first one done, we know the kinds of things we want to do in the future. So you'll have to just bear with us a little bit as we make sure we don't walk down the wrong road, make the wrong vote. And we say, oops, we did this wrong. We want to make sure it's exactly right.
Mr. Chairman, if I might just add to that, I don't think that us doing this is gonna be getting it exactly right. Because in my mind, I'm thinking, you know, if your house is on High Falls Road or Tomachichi or whatever it is that's adjacent to that, I'm thinking Interstate 75, big 15, 20-foot wall that you see like you're driving up the highway. I don't know that that's the answer. But if we want to make sure that there's a noise barrier or a light barrier, we need to put that in our ordinance. So I don't think that if whatever we vote on here, it's not gonna be perfect, but it will give us the opportunity to go back and put those things in that will be protective
Next time. Yes.
before we approve anything else.
Commissioner Dutton?
Stephen, I appreciate all of the redlining that's done here. Is it a deal breaker if we were to table this for one more month to come back through?
No, Commissioner.
Okay.
And is it-
Then let's talk about what we would.
And I think here, I think we need to be
What-
very clear
Yeah.
about what the board is saying when we table this. Because what we're doing is we're spending, I mean, they want an answer.
Yeah.
We need to get moving on, whatever we decide to do. So let's be clear, when we table it, what we're wanting them to do.
Yes.
And let's make, we're gonna have to make a decision at some point now.
And you could put it on your February 6th agenda if you chose.
Right.
I mean, cause
Yeah.
at some
Sooner
point
the
in time,
better.
Is
the decision has to
the,
be made.
is the road on, the access on Cheehaw is, I know a lot of us feel very strongly. Is that a deal breaker that road access has to go away? That's what I'm getting, right?
I think we
Yes.
said that.
Yes.
Okay, so we want conditions to limit them to only being able to come in and out on 16 if this were to get approved in the future, right?
Right.
Okay,
So that piece we've got.
okay. So, as far as the buffers go, like, how are we feeling? I think that they've really gone back and forth and fought this out. How are we feeling on where we're at with the buffers? Like, I brought up, hey, we need to specify that. Their attorney has brought up, hey, we could do that at the actual land disturbance permit portion, but I'd sort of like it codified here. Where are we feeling as far as buffers?
I'm fine with the adjusted buffers. Like I said, my biggest thing was that one property that was right in their backyard. You know, it could be better, but I mean, clearly when we making our own ordinance says 10 feet,
You know,
who can do something with 10 feet? So we need to go back and change that to a number that is real. And
Right.
based on what these folks are saying, no less than 75 or 100 should ever be allowed if you're close to a residential area.
well,
So,
and it needs to be clarified that that's from the end of the right of way as opposed to property line or what, you know what I'm saying?
middle
Like,
of the road, yeah.
because there's kind of a, well, where do we start measuring? And these guys measured from 25 foot to go, 50 foot back, but they really should have measured from 40 foot to go, so it's another 35 foot, back, so, or.
So,
whatever
so I
foot
think
back.
for me, the buffers are good. For me, with everything other than the language, I'm just really not good with the road on
Okay, so the language. Okay, so I see where that would take a little work here. So if we table this, then that will be the focus that we work on is the language in the ordinance. Is that what we're looking
Language,
at?
the language
Well,
we,
not just the language for the ordinance, the language of the ordinance would be for future.
Future, right.
You know what I'm saying? So those are
The
two
language
independent
of the
things that have to be
conditions.
happening. Yeah.
Right.
yeah.
The language of the condition.
Well, the delaying of the conditions on this
Right,
time, but also.
The things that people
Right.
questioned were not correct. And because, we've asked Eva to do this, I don't think that it's fair to bring it back on February the sixth because
There's a lot
we
going on.
don't, yeah.
And consistency, as we know, as we've been brought, is the key here too.
All right, so let's make, the roads is still a deal breaker.
We're asking them,
The road on
him
here.
to
I agree
ask
with that.
whoever, if they would consider,
So there's a
not
deal
having it.
breaker on the roads.
Commissioner,
Yes.
Chairman, Commissioner, on the Chi Hall Road access, it will decrease the size of the building, approximately 100,000 square foot. But if it is the will of this board to not have access on Chi Hall, then the applicant is fine with that.
Okay.
All right, now let's make sure everybody understands, that's a huge issue for what they have just done, and it's the number one issue that I have heard repeatedly from people and across the board tonight, the Chi Hall Road thing, so we'll fix that so that it does what all of us want us to do. We appreciate owners and everybody, developers, working to get that to a win-win for for us.
So, yeah, the only reason I don't want to approve it is because they said we had mistakes in our stuff.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
other than that, I'm good too.
All right, so we'll talk about tabling it until the next P and Z for really and truly two issues.
Defining
To
the
double check.
the trees and then correct the language that was supposed to be in this document altogether.
Eva, you got that?
Sure do.
Any issues with the timing of that?
I mean,
It's-
is there any reason we couldn't go ahead and take a vote with us removing the access on Chi Hall Road? With us removing the access on Chi Hall Road, I think,
Guys, we really don't want to have to remove people. Unfortunately, the applicant gets to speak. That's the way this works.
or I'll be glad to speak with our attorney
No,
and let him
no,
respond.
you good.
Okay. Yeah, with us removing the access on Chi Hall Road, which is a significant impact on this project, we would ask that you go forward and vote tonight. We started this process, it's been planning and design over a year. And, we've adhered with all of the things related to your code and ordinance. We'll abide by all the code and ordinances going forward, but we ask that you go ahead and vote on this tonight if we agree to remove the Chi Hall access.
I said, we can wait.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
I don't have a problem with that if part of the motion is that with the stipulation that there is no conflict in the language that we find.
So,
Because, well, I mean, what I'm saying is, if our
that's-
language conflicts what they're saying.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable with a stipulation that says that if things are wrong, then we have
That's
to
what
come
I
back
said,
and
we
do
can
it
table
over.
that. I'm good with that.
All right, so let's make sure everybody understands what we're getting ready to do. We're going to table this for really two reasons now. The staff wording on what's in their staff recommendation to us, and the exact wording in the buffer, in the conditions. We also,
Well, and not just the conditions. One of the questions we need to answer is how far the trees are, but now we sort of have two sets of conditions overlaid, and this is the conditions that are being proposed.
all right, so it's all about the buffer and the staff staff problem. We have an administrative issue to clean up our stuff. We are not going to approve something that is not right.
Yeah.
Let's make sure everybody understands.
And
That's
we've
not
got
what
the- we've got
commissioners
the
do.
Chi Hall Road
So
taken,
we're
that's
going
on
to
it.
tell the staff
And they've
to
agreed.
rewrite the staff recommendation to us,
Yeah, agreed.
rewrite that, get that back to us. And secondly, Eva, work with the developer to make sure that the wording that we want in the
conditions.
buffer is exactly what we have said tonight.
Okay.
And then on the next P and Z, we're focusing on those two issues only. We're not going back and starting all over again.
I don't really have a right to speak, Mr. Chairman, but I would be happy to share the inaccuracies that I have noted in this report with Ms. Morales. It may help her speed up
That'd be
her review of that staff report. And if I could be involved in the meeting and looking at the edited conditions, I think that would probably assist with many of those that are not.
Because we want to do it right. So-
Thank you, that is,
If I could have a seat at the table, I would request that, and I'll be happy to share them.
Eva,
Thank you.
make sure, Steve, that's okay with you?
It's part of the discussion.
Her being able to say that?
I think that would be helpful.
you know what you have to do to get to us. Her putting her words in there to make sure that we've covered it all. I don't want to get into a staff recommendation and we find out on page 4 of the staff recommendation, oops, here's 2 more mistakes that we didn't see.
We will get with Ms. Griffiths on the staff report inaccuracies, and we'll get the proposed conditions with the changes that the board has noted tonight to Ms. Morales.
Ms. Griffiths, if you would provide those to me as well when you provide them to Ms. Morales, and then give us a chance to work together before we all meet.
And of course, loop us in.
Yeah, this
Of
is-
course.
Yeah, we're looking for the win-win. Let's make sure everybody understands what the issue is we're looking for. All right, so,
I want to, before we get into
Make a
motions
motion.
and have to move on, I want to say how, how awesome it has been to go back and forth and engage with Steve. Steven has really gone above and beyond to try to get the developer on board, the community on board, to gone above and beyond. Some developers come in here and go, here's our plan, like it or leave it. And the amount, I mean, here we are cutting, access off from this road, and okay, here we've already got that, we've already thought about it. I really appreciate the hard work that you've done to get this. I wish more people had that same level of professional behavior that come in here and ask for stuff.
Well, Commissioner, I do appreciate the accolade. However, that is the way that this application proceeded is due solely to the applicant, who have made the commitment to engage to the fullest extent possible with your staff, with your planning commission, with the commissioners, as well as the community. So that's not my accolade, that's theirs.
all right, do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
Motion to close public hearing.
Okay, we've closed, what?
No, motion to table.
Excuse me.
Table item, I forget
No,
what.
first we closed the public hearing, don't we?
No, because then we.
We didn't open
Yeah.
the public hearing
Okay.
because this is a
Do I have a
public
motion
hearing. This is a
to
zoning
table?
public hearing.
Motion to table, Mr. Chairman.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor signify by raising your hand. 5-0. Do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
Motion to close the public hearing.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in, any discussion? All those in favor signify by raising your hand. 5-0.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you all for coming for this. We hope you understand that we're taking this as seriously as we can.
Date for the next,
February
what's
23rd?
the date for when this is coming back?
February
February
23rd.
23rd.
February 23rd. Okay.
We appreciate you guys coming. We wish we'd had this level of turnout at every meeting. We really do. And personally, I love the Thomas S. Monson quote. I appreciate that.
All right, we're at new business. If everybody would kind of move on out quickly, we'll get back and,
You want to take 5 minutes?
yeah, why don't we take a quick break for 5 minutes while everybody gets out? If you take your conversations out in the hallway, we'd appreciate it so that we can continue on. We have another, yeah, we're outside. All right.
You don't miss us. I know you are. Listen, because you live up there, right? Do you live up there? I never even thought about talking to you. But I'm gonna be talking to you. I know you. Is that you? Okay. Okay. All right. Okay.
Hey, Shepherd, how you doing? Good.
How many years now?
Oh, you're crazy. I've been here about 18. How's Norma? She's good. I saw y'all on the picture of William and, I don't know where y'all was at. Y'all was going somewhere. Well, good. Apparently you're enjoying retirement. Are you?
Brian Bowman. Nice to meet you, sir.
Great chipper. Great chipper. No, not true. Not true.
Ain't nobody gonna let you run that car. So they gonna either have to have here, but that's what I'm saying. Because the health department, I don't care, EPA
you're not allowed to go.
I think it'll keep the trees doing the DeKalb County, what they, blowing up the, police academy place. So, yeah. Right, so, yeah, I don't know what shout out that song Well, that's what I'm saying. You know who you're dealing with. So, yeah, they serious about that's why this room is for. You still got all your hair. Yeah, we're just going to get the language right, get the buffers there right. Yeah. Because I don't want to drag you through any more, but I think I kind of heard a sigh of relief when you said no traffic on it. I think that was key. I'm expecting that we're just gonna come back and clean up the language and find the trees and work.
Absolutely. How are you doing?
We know we got. How are you doing?
I didn't mean to interrupt you, I just wanted to, before I walk off.
No, somebody, Mr. Harrison. But without putting a road there, you could actually move your parking a little bit and hopefully not take that space off the building. You said loading was gonna be right up next to it.
Yes. Yours is
Down in the country? Yeah, to me.
All right, you got to go.
I'm good with that. Nobody ain't gotta worry about nobody's children, nobody got a horn coming out of their house. I just think we're doing.
Oh, okay, that's because it's really,
Yeah, I mean.
being really a POC thing.
You gonna see your house. This ain't about us. It's about them. You know, sometimes you have to. And I get it.
Well, I got mine rated, I got some good runners, so I ain't gonna.
You better not have no more babies.
Yeah,
thank you.
I don't wanna have to got the place down at Lake State Player, and it's one of them, and I don't wanna have to take care of another place. You know what I'm saying, I'm 69 years old, I'm chasing you.
I'm 84. That's why they were making that detention.
Tell them all I said hello.
No, the protection.
Little mama's still working out.
All those things, docks up there.
Monday.
If I could ask everybody to either take a seat or depart, we would appreciate it.
Hi, Donna. Thanks for coming. Y'all come back now, you hear? That's the
James.
campus. Mr.
James.
Brooks, we ready to start. Everybody waiting for you to let us have this thing up now. Keep going on.
Oh, yes, thank you. All right, we're back in session again. Item number 1 on new business. Consider approval of an extension to the resolution declaring a state of emergency. Ms. Wyndham?
As was previously addressed, I would ask you to extend the state of emergency, the local state of emergency, through February the 28th. The declaration that you have before you also allows for the extension of contracts for debris removal and debris monitoring. I don't believe we are going to need to extend the debris monitoring contract given the timing of our RFP, but I do believe we need to extend the contract for debris removal.
Do I have a motion to approve?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the extension of the resolution declaring a state of emergency through February 28th, which would also include approval to continue with our debris removal contract.
All right, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by raising your hand. 5-0, motion carries. Item number 2. Consider approval of a contract for CEFCOR, provide warehouse space to house FEMA relief items and donations.
These are just relief items and donations, not FEMA-specific relief items and donations. Chief Polk and Chief Byrd actually found this space, and CEFCOR has agreed to allow us to use it. We do not have an executed contract back from them yet, and we may not need the space, so this is a just in case.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve a contract with CEFCOR to provide us warehouse space to house relief items and donations.
Do I have a second?
Second. Oh, Rita's got it.
Okay, any discussion?
Where is it?
CEFCOR is.
It's out by the airport on, is it Aerodrome? Not Aerodrome,
1156 Uniform Road.
Uniform Road.
Thank you, Chief Byrd.
Okay. Any more discussion? All those in favor signify by raising your hand. 5-0, motion carries. Item number 3. Consider the approval for the addition of retail sales of wine to existing 2023 approved alcohol business, S&M Grocery. Ms. Wyndham?
Staff recommends approval. All the conditions have been met, no violations.
What's that address again?
This is the S&M Grocery out on Fayetteville Road.
Fayetteville Road?
Not
Yeah,
Fayetteville.
Highway
yeah,
92.
Highway 92.
At Bates.
Okay.
Oh, it's that, it's the gas station right there, it's a Chevron.
Correct.
Yeah, motion to approve.
Second.
All right, any more discussion? All those in favor signify by raising your hand. 5-0, motion carries. Spalding, Newton Galloway, Spalding County Zoning Attorney, present the first reading of a moratorium on rezoning, special exceptions, and other zoning procedures.
Actually, Mr. Chairman, you don't need but one reading.
Can you everybody hear him? Okay.
With Ms. Littlefield's departure from the Community Development Office and with work that Ms. Wyndham and I have done working with Ms. Morales, we believe that it is imperative for us to take some breathing room time to bring the office back up, start it on a path to get back up to speed, particularly until a new director can be named and employed for a period of time, at least a little bit of time. So this moratorium enacts or moratorium on rezoning special exception applications, preliminary plat approval, land disturbance permits, and construction plans. And that would allow for anybody who's got something in process now to have their application proceed on through. But it would stop it from tomorrow morning at midnight and go through May 31st, 2023. That gives us 4 months to study what needs to be done, get a new community development director in that position, and then get on the path to having that office back up to speed. There are more issues than just these, but those are the things that you can cover with a moratorium in order to give your staff, like I say, some breathing room time and for us to regroup.
Okay, so let's
Mr.
make,
Chairman, unintended consequences. Just having a nightmare about the last time we had a moratorium and people couldn't get a building permit to secure their building, and where does this put us in terms of, can anybody do anything?
We have not put a moratorium on building permits for property that is appropriately already zoned.
Okay.
and this will not affect anything with the disaster issues?
No.
Okay, want to make sure.
No.
And everything that's in the process will continue on?
Everything that's in process will be able to continue to closure and approval or fruition or denial. And it does not impact building permits for things, developments for which zoning is already in place.
Okay. That's countywide.
Countywide.
Motion to approve a moratorium on rezoning, special exceptions, and other zoning procedures to, for the duration of, till May did you say May 3rd?
May 31st.
May 31st, 2023.
It's roughly 120 days.
Okay.
Second.
All right, have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All those in favor signify by raising your hand. 5-0, motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Galloway. Consider the approval of Grayson Park Phase 2A final plat. The plat consists of 59 townhome units located within the VN Village Node District.
Where is this?
This is out on, close right next to Heron Bay. This is the extension of the Village Node out on 155.
This is
they-
our,
from the
this is the
Spalding
Spalding County
package.
side of.
Yes,
Yes.
correct.
Okay, yeah, got it.
This is the
All right.
approved, this is in the approved village node.
Okay.
All right.
We just wasn't sure where it
We were
was.
going, where is it?
So motion to approve
Call it Heron Bay.
the final plat, for
I would,
the,
Commissioner Flowers Taylor, I'd ask you to hold that motion for a second. There's some things we need to go through.
okay.
Yes. So this is a 59 unit / townhome development out on 155. Their final plat for phase 1 was approved on November 7th of 2022. As of this date, no dedication of the right of way and infrastructure has been completed. This has been added to the conditions that we have imposed on this development. The applicant is present here, but that dedication of the right-of-way and infrastructure is also going to be very important for this phase 2.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you the applicant?
Yes, Jeff Foster.
Mr. Foster, so 59 units on 9 acres. How many stories are we talking about?
These are all two-story townhomes as per the approved, these were approved in the land development permit. We also have a second portion of the townhomes, which will be another 86 townhomes in the next phase that's coming up. And then
Are there going to be any single detached units?
Yes.
Housing in that?
In phase 1, there are currently platted, we've currently platted 67 single-family lots. Then we have another 23 50-foot lots and 24-foot, 75-foot lots in the last phase that actually connects into the Heron Bay portion. But this is, yeah,
This
so
is
there's
phase-
269 total units.
Okay.
But yes, we've got the several townhomes that, in that pod.
Okay,
If
comments?
if I could address the final plat that's before you very briefly, and I want to state up front that my comments are not directed at a deficiency from Mr. Foster or from his development company, but reviewing what was approved in Phase 1 and comparing the approval to the requirements that are set out in the subdivision regs in sections 408 through 410. There were deficiencies that were not there were deficiencies in the plat procedure that were not caught. And we are trying to correct those between Phase 1 into Phase 2. Among other things, as Ms. Morales noted, was we have a requirement for provisions of dedication of right-of-way and infrastructure that have been completed. We also have a requirement that private covenants, if there are going to be any, have to be filed and available at the time of the final plat. Again, those are in the three sections that I just referenced. We have no indication that those were required when Phase 1 was approved in November of 2022, or that they were available or required by the staff in November of 2022. So, for purposes of the staff recommendation, you will see that we are asking them to come back and get those deficiencies corrected, approved. There's nothing wrong with the lots that they have platted. Y'all have done that fine. There were other things that were required by the ordinance that we apparently did not request of you. So we're asking them to come back and comply and provide us with the information that should have been done on Phase 1 as a condition of the final plat approval on Phase 2. I would also make one other point. On Sun City Peachtree and also with Heron Bay historically, we have worked with Minerva and Pulte and their other purchasers to have a little more comment and direction in the comments that are on the final plat. And those were not reviewed with y'all beforehand. You have not probably heard about those. We do not have a specific requirement in the ordinance for them, but we have had the cooperation of Minerva and Pulte to have those comments. Among other things, for those notes are attached. Kathy, if you would cursor down. Keep going.
Miss Kathy, I think it's in the other file, within the folder that I gave you.
So,
Here, I've got
my
extra
question for
copies.
Newton is, we approved this in November.
Yes,
Now we're
ma'am.
going back and telling them we're unapproving it?
That's what it sounds like.
No, we're
Okay,
asking them.
so how can we tell them we're conditionally approving it for them to go and do A, B, C, and D? I don't understand that. They did what they were supposed to do. We didn't do what we were supposed to do. Now we're gonna go back and make them wait.
We're not making them wait. Their final plat for Phase 1 is approved. We're asking them to supplement what they've got approved by means of additional information to comply with the ordinance. So they have proof of compliance with the final plat specs, and we have assurance that we have insisted on compliance with the final plat requirements in sections 408 through 410. So we are recommending conditional approval, but let's get these things caught up to have everybody in compliance with the requirements for both of their phases. It doesn't impact their lots. It doesn't impact your ability to continue to operate and continue to do whatever you're doing in Phase 1. Catch us up, get us into compliance. You're in compliance, you're assured that nobody from the county comes back and tells you, oh, guess what? Again, we missed this. And at the same time, we have assurance that when the next developer comes up, he can't look at us and say, you didn't require that, you didn't require that.
But he doesn't have to come back to us again.
No.
Oh, okay.
We're asking you to approve it conditionally, and when these things are done, then he simply is able to file your plat and move forward.
And Commissioners, we have been working on some of these items to get them into compliance. So this is the general notes from Sun City. We've had to change them slightly, but It's gonna be essentially the same, so.
I apologize.
Yes.
I really do. I mean, I don't even know what to
It's
say.
actually
We just messed up.
It's actually very embarrassing.
Thank you for being flexible
Well,
enough.
and Eva, we've been working
Yeah.
with trying to figure out what's going on and where we need to be, so.
All right,
Another thing that I would like to touch on is Fincher Road. This development requires that the abandonment of most of Fincher Road. Abandonment of Fincher Road has not yet occurred, so that's also something that we need to talk about.
I've had several conversations with previous staff, and there is no evidence that that road was ever dedicated to the county. There are no deeds or anything of dedication that we could find, that our surveyors or anything, our title search company found nothing to that effect. So we had asked for that information so that we could then begin proceedings because there's nothing that actually dedicates that road.
I think the only
suspect
information that I have is that we have actually worked the road, which means we accepted it, even without there being evidence of anything recorded.
It's
Evidence of that
probably a
acceptance
prescriptive
recorded.
right-of-way, isn't it, Stephanie?
Because,
Yes.
yeah, and.
Is that Fincher Road?
It is Fincher Road. There's one house on it that.
But that portion
has
is
that
not-
Fincher Road address.
We would not
We would have to abandon the rest of it.
We would
It's-
not be abandoning that is serving that piece, but
That's
the piece, and again, that was, we had asked for some direction on that, probably back in November, when all that came up,
Okay,
so,
I'm sorry about
so,
that.
but, we'd be happy to, get it abandoned, but at this point, we were not aware that it was actually a county-owned road. We could find no evidence and nobody is,
Because it has been county
Yeah.
maintained, that's,
okay.
I
So
would
we can
finally
help
like-
him fix that.
we actually just need a description of what we're abandoning, so, I do need a surveyor to look at it.
And I would like to tell Mr. Foster, we appreciate your cooperation with us. I'm sorry that the discrepancies have occurred, but this will get us back to square one. It helps you, it helps us. And to the board, this is not the last one of these that you will hear about.
Yuck.
So now can I make a motion to approve the
Yes,
final
ma'am.
plat with conditions? After we beat you down.
All right, is that what you need,
Conditional.
what she said? Newton?
Motion to approve
Conditional.
with conditions.
Okay.
Conditional approval of the final plat for the, what's the name of the subdivision? I don't see it up there.
Collection at Grayson Park, Phase 2A.
What
Okay.
she said.
All right, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All those in favor signify by raising your hand. All those opposed? All right, 4-1, motion carries. Okay. Item number 6. Consider the approval of final plat for River Park Industrial. The plat consists of 9 tracts located within Spalding County, with all the tracts being within the C2 manufacturing zone. Mr. Galloway.
Ava, you go ahead.
All right, so, this is a request for a final plat approval. This is the, final plat for the River Park Industrial that's off 75. It has also a conditional approval, based that we need a presentation of the final plat with required engineer and owner certifications, and the final plat may not be filed of record with the clerk or Superior Court until condition A is satisfied.
You good with that? With those conditions?
We're okay with that, yep.
Hey, welcome back.
Thanks. Okay, all right.
I might add, they were the plat that Mr. Palmer prepared on behalf of this developer satisfied the requirements dealing with I'm sorry, I'm losing my train of thought, the covenants. You have a reference to the covenants that they have filed in the county records. And also the streets in that are gonna be handled largely by Butts County, and those have been dedicated pursuant to an action by Butts County last Monday.
On Monday, yeah, this Monday.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
I have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All those in favor signify by raising your hand. 5-0, motion carries.
Thank
Thank you. At this time, let's quickly go through everybody. Comment from the, Ms. Wyndham,
No, sir.
Kathy, Mr. Galloway.
No more. We'll be discussing things over the next few
Okay.
months.
Eva,
No, sir.
Ms. Morel, okay.
Community development needs to be number one priority, amongst other things that we have. It's right up there with the top.
Okay. Joseph just bowed his head. Okay. Ryan?
I'm gonna say the same, and code enforcement. I'm getting hammered with code enforcement stuff.
Okay. Ms. Quinn?
Even though I'm disgusted, I'm just gonna say amen to the prayer that he said, because it was righteous. It was good.
Yeah.
And I just love the people in Spalding County because they showed up and showed out.
They did. We believe. All right. Vice Chairman?
I got the chance to go to the EOC meetings, Emergency Operations Center meetings, on several days. I had court days when I couldn't. I was amazed at how well you guys coordinated that stuff. I am honored that you work for us.
Cool.
The amount of outpouring from the community that we had is unbelievable. I started writing down a list of all the folks I wanted to thank, and we'd be here another hour. I mean, that's not even everybody. I mean, from organizations to groups to churches, unbelievable the turnout that we've had, the outpouring. I think we need to, when this really is behind us, we need to haul some of these folks in here for some recognition.
Absolutely.
We really do. And they're gonna go, no, not me. We're gonna go, yeah, you. We're gonna have to trick some of them to come in.
Miles?
I think those guys in the back have a list of some of those folks already.
Well, I hope so. They're keeping them.
They're on the list.
Yeah, I know.
Exactly,
There are
exactly. I mean, here we are with hundreds of volunteers, a week after the event, and other counties, Newton County, Rockdale County, are going, hey, we still got people trapped in driveways and stuff. Can you guys come help here? Like, you need Spalding County's help? Like, are we that well organized that these bigger, 10 times as dense counties need our help? Yeah, that's how well organized we are. And that's because of the work the people in this room, and a bunch of people who aren't in this room have put into it. And we just wish Dr. Ledbetter a speedy recovery.
Yes.
Like, the amount of pain he was in and yet still out there helping.
Yeah.
We have a unicorn on our hands.
I'd like to make a comment about one of the topics I talk about routinely, the diversity of the staff of the Board of Commissioners. It's interesting when you start to look at how we're doing business. We'll start with Rita working on making sure that we're looking at the claims side on who's doing what and getting the claims so that she talks to us about, hey, here's what the people are seeing from the claims side. Ryan working on the construction side and seeing what the construction people are all about. Gwen walking around looking at things about where the people are. Are we going to close a shelter and doing things like that? James turning around and getting a great deal of people, volunteers to come in. We're talking about hundreds of people to come in and do that. That's a diversity of staff, Board of Commissioners, that is really powerful for us to be able to do things with. If we all did the same thing, but this is an opportunity for all of us to get involved, and I truly appreciate all that effort to be able to do that. And with that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All right, motion is second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by raising your hand.
Jesus.
We're adjourned. Thank you all for coming.
No, man, that's the only thing to get me going is our people
Jared.
so strong.
Staff